myself and reminded them. It's still a little hot. Again. It's 5 o'clock and it's the scheduled time for a special council meeting. Mike, will you call the roll, please?
Call your Wise.
Here.
Helwig. Helwig. Thank you. Holland. Here. Humphrey. Here. Price. Here. Sorensen.
Here.
Ward. Here. Wilson. Here. Mayor Powell.
Here. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Adoption of the agenda. John or Mike, do you have any additions or corrections to the printed agenda? Motion a second to approve the agenda as printed. Roll call, please.
Call your Wise.
Aye.
Helwig.
Aye.
Holland. Aye. Humphrey.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Sorensen.
Aye.
Ward.
Here. Aye.
Wilson.
Aye.
Mayor Powell.
Aye. It's unanimous. Moving then to visitors to be heard. Addressing the council. Persons addressing the council shall use the microphone at the podium. Please raise your hand to be recognized. Go to the podium and state your name and address. For items not on the agenda, members of the public may speak under visitor to be heard on any topic not on the agenda. Remarks are limited to 5 minutes and no decision will be made at this time. For agenda items, public testimony will be taken at the beginning of each agenda item after the subject has been announced by the mayor and explained by staff. Any citizen who wishes may speak one time for 5 minutes on each agenda item. Public testimony will then be closed and the topic will be given to the governing body for possible action. At this point, only City Council members and staff may discuss the current agenda item unless a council member moves to allow another person to speak and there is unanimous consent from the council. Questions from council members, however, may be directed to staff or a member of the public through the presiding officer at any time. Is there anyone in the audience that has this item that they'd like to discuss that is not on the agenda? Anything not on the agenda? Seeing none, then we'll move to a public hearing. I'd like to give a little background on the public hearing. We've had several meetings with local people. We've had several phone conferences with mayors of other cities, and we've had several phone conferences with the governor, Noem. In all those meetings, the attempts have been to figure out what is best for our state. There's been a lot of patchwork done, a lot of patchwork thinking going on, where people were going down their paths independently. Some have criticized our city for not moving more rapidly. I would simply point out it's only been a couple of weeks that we've known what we're facing, and we're trying to get a handle on it where we don't know a lot yet. Several cities have put forth some proposed ordinances. We've discussed this with other city people throughout the state. And I think, in my own mind, I would prefer that we take more of a statewide position than each individual community coming up with its own. For example, perhaps a stupid analogy, but suppose Yankton imposed some meeting requirements, etc., on closures, and Vermillion did not. It would seem likely then that people from the Yankton area would come to Vermillion to take advantage of those services or whatever. which seems to me then to make it even worse because now they would possibly be taking back to their communities. So I like that our community, our city council is being proactive in this. I don't think we're running around with our heads cut off or anything like that. I think we're trying to take a very deliberate approach to this, and I think we're coordinating with quite a few other communities across the state. With that, I'd like to introduce our city manager, John, if you would, to talk about our resolution. Ordinance, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. John Prescott. Just kind of walk through a few things here. As you indicated, this has been kind of a changing, evolving matter over the last couple of days. The mayor and I were part of a conference call with the governor last Friday in the first-class cities in our state, and we had, I'll say, one outcome or one source of discussion related to how we're going to approach this on the larger communities statewide. Over the weekend, as we're probably most of us are aware, there was some community spread in the northeast community in our state, and we started to see some of those cases increase. That did lead to a couple of changes. The city of Rapid City and Huron, Beadle County adopted a resolution, or excuse me, an ordinance very similar to what is before you on Sunday evening. On Monday, the city of Watertown and Brookings adopted a similar ordinance, and then Yankton is considering it at some point today. I don't know what time their meeting was. With that said, these things have been kind of changing, and I'll just kind of walk through a little bit of the ordinance. I believe, I hope, obviously the city council members in the last 12 hours have seen several versions of this, and I believe that we have the latest one in front of you, but I will kind of walk through it for you. There is a copy available on our website and some copies here in the room for participants as well. Proposed Ordinance 1413 is going to look very similar to what you'll find these other communities are considering as well. Part of that is we felt it was better as the first-class cities to have a more common framework rather than have a hodgepodge. With that said, there are a few little nuances to the Vermillion ordinance that I'll point out as we go through here. The first page of the ordinance is very typical of what you see. I'll call it, it's kind of the setup or the justification of that ordinance. There's a lot of the things that as residents of our state, our community, our nation, we're familiar with a lot of these things, actions that have transpired with regard to COVID-19. So I won't go through that or belabor that, but the first page to page and a half is a lot of the justification and setup for this particular ordinance. The meat of the ordinance, I think what people are probably most interested in, starts at the bottom of the second page, or middle of the second page. If I may, I'm just going to read number 1 because that's probably the one where there has been the most discussion or might be the most discussion. And number 1 reads, after now therefore be it ordained, effective on 7 p.m. Monday, March 30th, 2020, all restaurants, food courts, coffee houses, bars, breweries, distilleries, wineries, clubs, cafes, and other similar places of public accommodation offering food and beverage for on-site consumption, including any alcohol licenses with on-sale privileges, are closed to on-site, on-sale patrons. These businesses may continue to operate in order to provide takeout, delivery, curbside service, and drive-through service. Any business continuing to operate in order to provide lawful off-site service should implement procedures to ensure social distancing and operation in compliance with federal and state health guidance in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So that's probably the one I anticipate the most questions on. I guess I should also note in this ordinance, or even in that paragraph I read, I know there's things that we don't have in our community, but again, we're trying to keep the same language. I know we don't have an airport concessionaire, for example, but we're trying to keep these things similar amongst many of these cities. So that would allow a lot of our bars and restaurants, if they provide takeout, delivery, curbside service, or drive-through service, to continue that portion of their operation. It would, the social gathering, the gathering inside of the place for a sit-down meal, that was what would no longer be allowed during this time period. And I would also note that the effective date is at your discretion. You have the ability to change that. With first reading of the ordinance and visiting with the city attorney, your second reading has to be 5 days later. You can count Saturday, but you cannot count Sundays or holidays. So if you adopt first reading, the soonest you could have second reading is on Monday, March 30th. The time can be established by the council. 7 p.m., quite honestly, was in some of the other ordinances, so I carried it forward. You could make it noon if you wanted to, whatever time would follow your second reading. I'll go on through a couple more sections here. 2, basically recreational facilities, public pools, health clubs, athletic facilities, and theaters. And our theater is already shut down due to this. They would be prohibited from operating during this time period. That's what number 2 is about. They all, in this proposed ordinance, have the same start time of 7 p.m. Monday, March 30th. The third one deals with lounges, hookah lounges, cigar bars, vaping, and so forth. Those would not be allowed to operate during this time period. Number 4 deals with arcades, bingo halls, bowling alleys, casinos, and so forth, trampoline parks. They would have to cease operations again effective at 7 p.m. Monday, March 30th. So those are the operations that would no longer be allowed to operate. Section 5 on here provides that those things which could continue. And again, I know we don't have some of these in our community, but for consistency of this ordinance, we did leave those in there. If there are changes, I will note that they are at the bottom of that list. You have G, which would be official meetings of the city, school, county, or state. 5 would be operations and meetings of any state, federal, local governments or their courts. I is educational institutions and the related services under the governance of the Board of Regents or local school boards to the extent permitted by the governing authorities. We propose adding J, which is not in the copy that's provided to you, parks, trails, hike, bike path, and the Bluffs Golf Course. In our visiting on that and visiting with other cities, they are allowing those facilities to stay open. So this kind of keeps us in conformance with that. With that said, and Jim's here if you have particular questions, those would be appropriate protocols with how that clubhouse would operate, as well as even like the sharing of carts wouldn't necessarily be allowed. So those are kind of the do's and don'ts that this ordinance provides. I would maybe point your attention or community's attention to number 6. If ours varies from the other ordinances that have been adopted, this one's a little bit different. We wrote this to believe what I think is the way that our community operates a little bit better, or is more reflective of our community. All of them start out the same. This ordinance is for 60 days, and then if it were to continue for 60 days, that's a specific action of the governing body for it to continue beyond that 60 days. Where it's different is that the next section reads that each regular city council meeting, so coming up in April will be then the 6th and the 20th and so forth during the 60-day period. At each regular city council meeting during the 60-day period, or at a special meeting called for consideration of this ordinance, the city council will have as an agenda item consideration of a resolution to suspend the provisions herein prior to the end of the 60-day period. I think that fits our community better. It's a responsiveness. It's that you, if you choose to adopt this, are going to continue to look at it. You're not just going to put it on the shelf and let 60 days run by. You can adjust it as this adjusts in our state, as it adjusts in our community. The final sentence, any restriction contained in this ordinance may be modified at any time by a resolution of the City Council, which modification may expand its scope to additional businesses, activities, or operations. That language is somewhat similar in other communities. Ours just provides that opportunity for you to do it via resolution. And then the final section of that, number 7, is the simple language that we have in any ordinance is that a violation is subject to section 1099 of our code. That number varies across the state. And each day a violation of this ordinance is allowed to occur as considered a separate offense. And then there's a little bit more justification with regard to the state statute that provides for it. Again, in response to what I was hearing, this proposes the tightest possible time frame for you, adoption tonight and then a second reading on the 30th. You could delay that if the 30th doesn't work out or not. I should mention, I apologize for missing this as we first went through, if you back up to on the middle of the second page, there is the last whereas. And this was a point that was discussed a little bit earlier today. What that one points to is while this ordinance cannot legally become effective until after the second reading of the ordinance, which must be at least 5 days after the first reading due to state law, the city strongly urges all businesses to start voluntarily complying with these regulations immediately. And there's a story in a town that has a blue university where a number of the establishments there okay, don't pay attention, that they did voluntarily comply with that before it was adopted. So we did build that language in there. I would note an appreciation to the VCDC. We did organize a meeting this afternoon where in particular bars and restaurants were invited to gather some input from them, to get some thoughts from them about this ordinance. And Councilmember Collier-Wise was present in the room. Councilmember Holland was on the phone or Zoom. I don't know, not all the phone numbers are identified. If any of the rest of you were there, I'm sorry, I couldn't tell that. But they were able to hear some of those comments and questions with regard to this ordinance, and I think we helped clarify some of those things. So be happy to answer any questions that the council might have.
Thank you, John. Members of the audience, any comments, questions? Yes, please. Come to the podium and name and address, please.
Thank you. Kevin Annis, 810 North Crawford Road. I was just here, and just to start out, I appreciate you guys doing this. It is a serious thing, and I'm glad that you guys are taking steps that you are. I just had one comment on, and I appreciate, have a convenience store on the west side of town, and we are in the group that gets to stay open, and we appreciate that, by the way. But we also have video lottery machines, which I know fall into some of the beer establishment type things, but I just wanted to make this available to you just to see you kind of new. A lot of that video lottery revenue is what keeps some of our convenience stores going, and I think there are ways to get around the social distancing rules and things like that, and the number of people meeting in one area. It's pretty simple in the convenience store video lotteries, because you can turn every other machine off or turn 6 of the 10 off or whatever, and keep a nice distance for everybody. So I just wanted you to consider that, like for the group that I'm speaking for, there's really only 4 businesses that fall into this in Vermillion. And I talked to one person and they thought, well, I don't know if I'll even stay open, you know, which would lose a couple jobs. Me personally, I'm talking about closing my overnight shift, which isn't a big deal to a lot of people, but there are some that's when they operate, is at night, and we take EBT cards and things like that that won't be available to those people with Hy-Vee and Walmart shut down also. So I just wanted you to know that, you know, if there was a way to work that out, that we could, you know, keep these people employed. I'm guessing it would be, you know, roughly 8 people just in our group of 4 that would be losing their jobs because of this. So we'd keep 8 jobs, we'd keep a little revenue going for the state. It'd help us keep our hours and availability for people that need us for gasoline and different things. So just thought I'd bring that up as a consideration. I know there's a lot of things out there to worry about, and this is probably not the biggest one, and I understand that, but as a businessman, I thought I should be at least available to bring that up to you, so to give you that option of something to think about on this as well.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Questions for Kevin? Okay, anyone else? Anyone else in the audience wish to make a comment? I know we have some comments from people that are not here. I think I would suggest those are from the audience as opposed to from the council. So those of you that have messages from people who are not able to be here to deliver them, I think it'd be appropriate if we did that at this time. Is that agreeable with the council? Certainly, that would be very appropriate. I think it should be separate from the council's deliberations.
I can do that. I can explain that. But I do have some questions for Mr. Prescott. Is he still available?
Yes, but we were taking comments from on the audience.
So Tom, do you want to read that one?
I'd rather read that from the
Well, we're dealing with comments from the audience. And if you wouldn't mind, Tom, if you wouldn't mind reading it from out at the... Would you mind reading it from out there, please?
You want me to stand at the podium?
However, I don't think there's any chairs there. So. I'm trying to treat it as audience participation as opposed to council participation.
So this is from a member of our community who did not wish to be here or could not be here, and asked, I think, several of us to insert this into the record. This is from Dr. Vicki Walker, a medical doctor here in the community. Dear city leaders, the current threat we are facing is unlike any other public health issue that has occurred during my lifetime. As our elected officials, you carry a heavy burden to protect our community. As a doctor, neighbor, and friend, I thank you for taking actions now to reduce the impact that this illness will have in Vermillion. It is tempting to brush off dire predictions as people overreacting. We have all sat through endless news coverage of the blizzard that never happens. We have developed a bit of wait-and-see attitude towards most challenges. Unfortunately, that attitude in this situation has had deadly consequences across the world, as we have seen in news reports. Here in Vermillion, I believe that most businesses and individuals are doing their best to be responsible, but there is a steep learning curve to figuring out best practices. I encourage the city, in order to protect our citizens, to immediately coordinate efforts that will ensure that each business that remains open has a plan to adhere to expert public health recommendations to limit the spread of this infection. Thank you for your service. Sincerely, Dr. Vicki Walker.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So I had two folks that sent me testimony that they would like read into the record. The first comes from Dr. Alana Sven. Dear City Council, as a concerned citizen, healthcare worker, and trained researcher in basic human sciences, I wholeheartedly support Governor Noem's executive order, March 23rd, that we take measures to stop the spread of COVID-19 within our community. Many Vermillion businesses have elected to close their shop, restaurant, or business on their own in the best interest of the community they serve. COVID-19 deaths are doubling every 3 days, and rural America is not immune. Measures to protect businesses, restaurants, and shop patrons is imperative. Additionally, measures to protect our small businesses is imperative. Theoretically, if our businesses collectively served 300 Vermillion, Clay County residents in a day, based on the current mortality rate of 2%, of those 300, 6 will die from COVID-19 if we do not take proactive measures. Of course, we need our businesses and still want what they offer. My suggestions: takeout only for all restaurants, customers screened at the door for symptoms and fever, and no more than 10 customers allowed in essential businesses such as pharmacy, liquor store, grocery store, etc. Perhaps bars could be authorized to sell off sale, patrons could call and pick up. Wilson Flores should be delivery only. A resident ought to be able to support their downtown businesses by buying gift cards for future use from a central community website to make it easy. Through creative practices, we can protect the public and support Vermillion businesses at the same time. The other comments come from Dr. Courtney Merkwan, who lives here in Vermillion but is an emergency medical provider in Yankton. My take is that we have less than 10 ventilators at Sacred Heart. Vermillion has fewer. This is an illness when one simple oxygen supplementation with and then she's using some technical terms that I am not able to, we're talking about medical equipment here, doesn't work, and most are recommending to go straight to ventilators. 6% mortality in ages over 60, 14% requiring hospitalization from China's numbers. It's serious. CDC guidelines state that people need to stay 6 feet apart from each other and not have groups larger than 10 people. Flattening the curve will help us care for the people by not having a larger volume of patients falling ill at the same time. Courtney also reached out to me that she's thinking about, as an emergency medical provider, having to make decisions about who gets ventilators and who doesn't. And that's a terrible position for someone to be put in. And so she just wanted to make sure that the seriousness of that was passed on to you all.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience has a comment or question? Anyone else in the audience? Seeing none, we'll turn it to the council for deliberation. Tom, you had questions for our city manager?
Thank you. I think most of these are kind of simple, but I don't know how important it is, and I keep referring to you, but I'm sorry, I mean Jim McCullough. Could we or should we, this mic is really hot, Don. I can move back. Should we insert on the time, Central Daylight Time, simply for clarification, even though that might be different than the other towns?
We certainly can.
I mean, I don't know that that will even require a vote, would it, Jim? No, okay. On number 2, where it says recreational facilities, and later on when it's in 5G, when we talk about the state in any form, we're the ones with a major campus, and I'm wondering how we address things like softball fields, baseball fields, because it says state in that line. Is that enforceable? Or is it just, it's just a recommendation, I guess?
Yes, and I'm sorry, are you referencing 5G?
Yeah.
Okay, so 5G are,
Number 2 and number 5G.
okay, 5G would be things that are exceptions or things that would be permitted. So G would be official meetings of the city, school, county, or state. So that one, if I'm following you right, 5G would be things that would be permitted as a gathering.
Okay.
2, recreational facilities, public pools, health clubs, athletic facilities, theaters, movie theaters, music, entertainment venues. And so on that aspect of it, as a subunit of the state, as a city, it's a little more difficult for us to tell them what to do.
I understand that.
So, although, as I understand it, I believe most of those student athletes have either gone home or they're doing remote learning for the balance of the semester. So I do not believe any of our spring sports teams are practicing.
Okay.
But that's my understanding.
Thank you.
May I interject here? This afternoon, the Regents closed the campus for the rest of the semester, so it'll only be distance learning, and commencements have been delayed.
So that's a moot point then, apparently after that.
It came out just this afternoon.
Okay. I appreciate it. Now, I do have a couple more. The 60 days, if for non-publication purposes, we're talking about pretty immediate effectiveness of this, but not counting Sundays, does the 60 days include Sundays?
To my knowledge, and let Mr. McCullough, I believe that is a flat 60-day time period. So if it's March 30th, I understand it go to May 30th then. Would that be a fair assumption? The day count involving Sundays or holidays is only as it relates to what counts in between
Second
readings.
reading.
Between first and second reading.
And finally, I didn't have time to look this up, but I should have, but I was busy on the phone and emails and everything else, as I'm sure all of us were. Could you give some examples of penalties under 10.99 ordinance?
Well, that would be one we probably would want to have, as we typically do with second reading of an ordinance, establishing what that penalty would be. And I believe, unless it's changed, the highest that penalty could be would be $500. That is the maximum allowed by the state for that. I'm not suggesting that, but it might be something to consider with second reading of that ordinance if you want to put a penalty, assign a dollar amount. I will tell you of the ordinances I've looked at, I believe there's one city who actually named a dollar amount. The rest of them use language similar to ours, just whatever their code site is.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Sorry?
I was going to see if there are other council members that have.
I have more later.
Okay, let's take some turns. Rich, please.
John, I apologize. I think I read through it pretty good. Which section covers video lotteries?
And that was to Mr. Annis's point, that's a good question. That is one of the things that came up following the meeting we had at 2 o'clock is how this applies or doesn't apply to video lottery. And Mr. Annis and Mr. Carlson are more versed in it, but I believe to have video lottery, they have to have a malt beverage license. Correct? I'm doing good so far. Okay, so that is one of an off-sale malt beverage license. On-sale. Okay. They have to have an on-sale malt beverage license. That is one of the requirements in our state to have a video lottery machine. I do not believe that it means they have to actually be serving. We haven't.
Because they will still have their license.
Yeah, they'll still have their license. So it would probably, with regard to this, it would probably be best that they did not serve, but they could still have their video lottery machine. To your point, exactly which one addresses it, I mean, we did not cite, and oddly enough, none of these other cities have video lottery lounge or a gathering. If that's something that you'd like to include in one of those sections, we can certainly do that.
No, it is not. But what I was trying to find out what section might be covered under this. Would it be 5A? Or no, excuse me, 4? 4? Okay, fine. Now, the question I have for that is, John, is that number 4 identical to the other cities?
Yes, that is not, other than some of those cities, the effective date and time changed, but otherwise, that language is nothing different.
Great. Because if we change it, we'd be unique and that could cause a problem.
Yes, I mean,
Thank you.
sure.
Further, counsel? Steve, please.
I guess I'd like to follow up on that. So are we defining video lottery rooms as casinos?
I believe typically, I look at these two gentlemen, I believe
Yeah.
typically referred to as a casino. Is that?
I would say the generic term would be casino, yes.
Is that the legal term, though? I mean, that's what I'm...
Yes, I can't answer that question. I don't know if Mr. McCullough wants to take a stab at that one.
Well, I would say that if you want to have a legal definition, if a casino is to me in Vermillion a video lottery establishment, then it would probably be more better legally defined as an establishment licensed to permit video lottery activity.
So if it's the intent of the council to include video lottery rooms in this, then we should add that language. If we are of the mind to permit video lotteries to continue to be open, then we could leave it as is.
I would, yes, but I might suggest that if you would like to make sure that that is clear, that they could remain open, perhaps it's something that should be added in section 5. I mean, I'm not,
It could be, but it could be added to section 5. You could say convenience stores, video lottery rooms, things like that in 5. But I would, to prevent confusion, if you're going to allow that, then you should take casinos out of 4.
that's another way to address it. Yeah.
Thank you. Kelsey?
I mean, based on both the governor's order and the recommendations that we've seen, I feel like an enclosed, non-essential space where people would be lingering probably should be included in this. I mean, I think that's the reason why it was originally included and has been included in the other communities. I also had been contacted today by a local salon owner who was saying that they believe that hair salons, nail salons, and massage parlors should also be included because they can't safely operate under the CDC guidelines, and so it puts them in a position where they either continue to be open and operate unsafely or choose to close, which, as we discussed at the meeting this afternoon, could have other potential ramifications. And so she had asked that they also be included in that. So I would ask for that consideration as well.
I might suggest that might perhaps in section 2, maybe where that might be the closest at? Yeah, with the health club. I mean, that's the one closest to it.
Spas. With regard to the lottery, would those institutions still be allowed to sell alcohol to go?
Yes.
So what would police them just bringing it back in and having it with them in the lottery room, if you will? Just a comment. Rich, did you have a question?
Well, the reason I brought it in the first place is sort of parallel what you said earlier, Mayor, that if we make ourselves different from the rest of the towns, we encourage outside traffic more, because now we're a spot to go to, and that would be counterproductive for what we're trying to do. So if all other communities are the same and allow video lotteries, fine. If not, we shouldn't either.
Tom? No, you're next.
I believe, I'll give you an example, the Attorney General's office in South Dakota and state law has the city council and other local governments be notified 30 days ahead of a raffle, which is a lottery. If you want to boil a lottery down or a video or gambling down, you have to have chance, prize, and consideration, those three elements. And that's why we hear from various people in town when they're going to have a raffle ticket, because it's gambling as defined by state law. I think some of these changes we're talking about, as much as I would love to be very positive about all this, I think it would add ambiguity to the ordinance and those two spots. And I'm wondering if it should be left as is because of that, because ambiguity is a great legal argument. That said, if I may, I still have a little time, I think.
No dinner times.
Our roots are very strong in Vermillion, and this is to everybody, John, not just you.
Yeah.
Vermillion's roots are strong, Clay County's are, Wassay-Wacapa's roots are very strong. We have good neighbors to consider in Nebraska and in Iowa. There could be long days ahead while we await for those strong roots to regenerate new shoots, leaves, flowers, and fruits. We don't know how our economy will come back, but it will. We should not have waited to tackle this, perhaps. The wait-and-see attitude was a tragic mistake in 1918 when 50 million people died globally and 675,000 died in the United States. My dad was a year old. I'm lucky to be here because they didn't take immediate steps. Saving lives now will ensure future business survival, future customers, future student enrollments. Economies were devastated in the past, but because of people like you and this community, it will return. It will be strong enough to partake in the years ahead. War is not anti-business. This is war. 1918 was war. So we can revive business, jobs, customer numbers, and our own loved ones. We need to do something now, so I'm in favor of this ordinance, and I move its approval as amended or not.
We have a motion?
I was going to clarify something.
I'm sorry? I was going to just see if we get a second, and then we'll continue.
Tom, does yours include the language for the salons, massage parlors, and?
As proposed by the city, no, it does not. I would add central daylight time to the time element.
That can be done without a motion.
Right.
But are you,
I'm not going to second without discussion of those.
okay. Is there a second for the motion?
Even for discussion purposes.
We have to have a second.
Really?
You know that.
Yeah.
So we're back to no motion on the floor. Now it's still up to the council.
May I?
Oh, now, John,
I'm sorry, just to clarify, I apologize. I we did not change that section 4 from the version I took it off of, but to Mr. Holland's question, I quickly went through the 5 ordinances that I have here, and so I need to clarify that part of it. Brookings and Rapid City do include casino in number 4. Yankton's proposal in number 4 says video lottery casino operations, so they added a little bit, but Huron and Watertown took it out. So I realize I just made it more complicated, but I also want to clarify that I misspoke on that. So 2 took it out, 2 used that same language that we had, and 1 modified that language, probably more of a clarification. Sorry about that.
Thank you, John, for the
I just hadn't read
clarification.
it for the word casino
Yeah.
before.
Kelsey, did you wish to say anything more? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you, Steve.
John, I have a question for you. Under number 1, there is no off-sale liquor license. Is that correct?
Just the city.
Just,
The off-sale liquor license is the liquor store.
that's the only one?
Yes.
Okay. Is it within state law for municipalities to allow off-site liquor
So,
sales?
yeah, we had that question arise from one of our bar owners, and on the conference call today, I posed that question to the governor because we were kind of running long or short on questions. We had time, so I asked the governor that question. And I'm not picking on her; she didn't necessarily know the immediate response to that. But the conversation was creativity and how do we work with businesses? What can we do to help them get by? And in some of our, at least one neighboring state, something like that has taken place. And so we posed that question. She promised that she'd have somebody get back to me, and it wasn't 10 minutes later, after the call ended, that the Department of Revenue was contacting me to clarify that. The Department of Revenue individual that we spoke with said that, in their opinion, that would take legislative change by the state legislature to do that. That the license is defined by the statutes that are adopted by the legislature, signed by the governor. Jason Evans, I believe, he had reached out to some of the other states that had done or made changes like that, and he said, how'd you do that? What's your authority to do that? And so their states must operate differently. Ours would require, per the Department of Revenue, a legislative change for that to be allowable. We can't do it as a city, it has to be done by the state.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Oh, Julia, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize your voice.
I have a question regarding the timing. Right now it's set for 7 p.m., but John was saying we would be able to set that for an earlier time. I'm wondering, I understand that we have to meet first, but I'm wondering if we would be able to set up a meeting for Monday morning instead, if we have a forum, counselors who would be available in the morning to be able to let us take effect as early as possible.
Council? Howard? Howard, are you there? Yeah. What time in the morning, Julia? No. 7 doesn't work.
I would prefer, again, to meet remotely, given that I'm high risk, but honestly, timing does not matter to me.
I would prefer 9 or later. 9? Consensus, council? Tom? We'll put that in too. Okay, when is that then? Monday?
9 a.m. would be great.
Yes, Monday, March 30th.
Does that require a vote?
I don't believe you're just setting a meeting time. I think they'd be fine.
But is that going to be the effective time of the ordinance then, is 9 a.m. instead of 7?
You could have it be at 9 a.m. if you wanted it to be.
Okay, I think that's Julia's intention.
Okay, thank you. Joe.
Thank you. Sorry, okay. I do have something to say, but I'm also going to make a motion, so should I make a motion first before I have something to say? What would be better?
Make the motion.
Okay, I'd like to move the ordinance with the time change to 9 a.m. with the addition of the salons and hair and massage stuff on number 2, with the addition of the video lottery in number 4, so that we are close to what Yankton is doing for the reasons that Rich brought up. And then with the letter I that the administration recommended for the outdoor activities under 5. Or is it J?
Yeah, Jay.
J? Oh, thank you. To include those as allowable activities with appropriate measures or whatever it was the administration said. So I would like to move this ordinance with those amendments.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion. Rich?
John, did I misunderstand you? I thought you said that what Kelsey wants was covered.
Are we speaking about the massage,
Yes,
hair
yes.
places, those sorts of items? It's not,
Not explicitly, is that
it's
it?
not explicitly spelled out, and I think what I'm sensing is more clarity on that to, well, and I would say that I'm not sure that you could say salons, and I'm paraphrasing, I'll get a better word, hair places, probably not use the word places, and massage parlors or massage establishments. I don't really think they're addressed either way in here right now.
Fine, thank you.
I'm sorry? Okay.
Okay, I liked the phrase that was used by the governor's office to creative solutions. That's definitely something that the state employees have been working on, as the university was asked to sort of revamp how they do everything in a week, and lots of creative solutions there. And I believe that our community can also do that and power through with the creative solutions. I think we can do it. But this is a very serious situation, and we need to take it very seriously. I had a phone call today from a citizen in Vermillion who expressed that they believe that they have self-quarantined themselves because they believe that they are carrying the virus after traveling recently, but that they were unable to confirm that with a test through the Sanford Clinic. So I do believe that the virus is in Vermillion, and the only way that we can restrict its spread is with severe measures like this, and I support us doing that.
Further discussion.
So I just want to say that I did really appreciate the opportunity to talk to some of the folks that are going to be the most affected by this. And I'll say some of what I said to them, which is that this is going to be really, really tough. It's going to be really tough on them. It's going to be tough on our economy. It's going to be tough on the people that are going to lose their jobs. It's going to be tough on the city. There's a lot of projects that we have envisioned that are going to have to be put on a shelf for a very long time. There's people that are going to go bankrupt. There are businesses that will close and will not reopen. And I'm not going to pretend that what we're doing is not going to do those things. But I also believe that it's absolutely necessary to save lives. And I believe that our business people, as sad as they are, realize that and know that they are willing to make that sacrifice to save the lives of their neighbors, because that's the kind of community that we have. Because of that, I do implore you to consider not waiting until Monday to close. Please do it beforehand. The models that we're seeing are telling us that we need to do it sooner than later. I know that there was some concern that people might not be able to get disaster assistance if they close voluntarily. I would ask, again, consider those creative solutions. Maybe you're open because you've got one person there and an open sign on, but you've got a sign on the door saying don't come in. You know, maybe you close for cleaning for 4 days, or whatever it takes, so that we can all work together and be on the other side of this. I would ask citizens to also please make the same sacrifices that your business people are making. They are putting their lives on hold to try and save you, so do the same for them. Order, take out and get the gift cards and do all of those things, but don't show up in the next 4 days hoping to get a last hurrah and put everybody in danger and make all of this sacrifice worth nothing. I really appreciate our city staff and how hard they've worked on this and how quickly they've turned this around. I expect that they will be leaders and set an example in how we're supposed to behave by letting as many of our city staff work from home as possible. Let's keep our people safe too, and really be the example that the rest of the community can follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom?
Final note, if I may, in discussing this proposed ordinance, and in addition to it, I propose that this community think very hard and quickly about an advisory panel of local experts be formed, including medical doctors, nurses, the fire EMS director, and the Clay County Emergency Manager, and a representative of the 730th Medical South Dakota National Guard unit that is here. These are community resources that can help us fine-tune, if you will, the information and guidelines set forth by the CDC, including the no more than 10 people by the CDC on March 13th, and the South Dakota Department of Health. I also believe that the city, and perhaps jointly with the county, should formally ask the governor to have the local Army Medical Company assist our local hospital and clinics by any means capable, including available trained medical personnel and equipment, such as gloves, masks, respirators, or other supplies. National Guard units pride themselves on being in their community. And at least ask the governor to designate Vermillion's unit as a backup to our medical and healthcare providers because they are trained. It was a great recruiting tool years ago for the 730th Field Hospital to set up in 4-H fairgrounds area and bring in helicopters and whatnot, but it showed how they can support the community. I would also ask quilters and other people who sew a lot to consider making masks and gowns. We have a distillery in town that I think should consider manufacturing hand sanitizer. Are they? Okay, good for them. We also have MDs and other professors and instructors at USD and the medical school who might be available to the local healthcare community. They are accomplished community members. Finally, on a personal note, before the vote, which I would like to have as a roll call, except we have two people on the phone.
That's why it will be a roll call.
Okay. I want to remind everyone that elections are approaching. The City Council will have open seats, one in each ward. I believe in my ward there is a teacher who was recently, in recent years, honored by the VCDC, and I am not running again. I'll publicly announce that. And no applause. Having served several terms, I started on the City Council in 1990. Now it's your turn. The deadline for filing is March 31st. See Mike Carlson for the petitions and get them filed. Get involved in your republic's local democracy. Thank you for your encouragement and support these past few years. I will always love Vermillion, and that means all of you. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Jim, please.
I would like to add something more.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I want to acknowledge all the people who communicated not only with me, but with all the council members on this issue, especially in support of this ordinance. But I just want to acknowledge that there are several questions left unanswered. I want to echo what Kelsey said about voluntarily closing earlier because we are unable
Thank you, Julia. Jim, we have, is it three? You have three amendments to the ordinance? Do we take them up one at a time?
I was wondering if we could just spend a minute going down through each section that I think was amended and make sure we've got the amendments the way the movers and seconders want.
Okay.
On paragraph 1, the change would be effective at 9 a.m. CDT for Central Daylight Time, and then comma, Monday. On item paragraph 2, again, 9 a.m. CDT, comma, Monday. And then the second line after health clubs, comma, add spas, comma, hair and nail salons, comma, massage facilities, comma, and then move on to athletic facilities in the rest of that paragraph. Then going to number 3, effective, okay, the first line, 9 a.m. CDT, comma. It's the only change on that paragraph. Then 4, same, 9 a.m. CDT, comma. And then I was unclear where we ended up on casinos.
What was it that Yankton had in theirs?
You added that it be casinos and video lottery.
However, I thought he said video lottery.
John's looking at it. They use the language video lottery casino operations.
Sounds good.
So
Not a
that-
comma between lottery and casino.
So instead of casinos, we would use video lottery casino operations.
Okay.
And then the only other change would be an added J, and I was wondering if John could just read that so that we all have it the same. And then I think that's all the changes.
J was parks, comma, trails, comma, hike, bike, path, comma, and the Bluffs Golf Course.
Yes. That all sounds right.
Covers them all, so we can do that all at one time, Jim? Okay, so we have a motion with these amendments. Everybody understand what we're voting on? Okay, it's time for a roll call vote, please, Mike.
Collier Wise. Aye. Helwig.
Aye.
Holland. Aye. Humphrey. Aye. Price. Aye. Sorensen. Aye. Ward. Aye. Wilson. Aye. Mayor Powell.
Aye, so it would be 8-1. The ayes have it, so the ordinance has passed. We have no other business at this. We have no other business, so at this point, Tom moves we adjourn. And Steve moves second. All in favor signify by saying, oh, sorry, Mike.
Collier Wise.
I forgot.
Helwig. Aye. Holland. Aye. Humphrey. Aye. Price. Aye. Sorensen.
Aye.
Ward. Aye. Wilson. Aye. Mayor Powell.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all for coming and participating.